Hi, and thank you so much for joining us for Well Life Warriors, How to Use Ancient Healing Techniques for Modern Day Pain Relief. Today we're speaking with Tim Asher, who is a San Francisco-based healer and alternative medicine practitioner. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to start off with asking a little bit more about yourself and how you got started in this field.
Sure. So my name is Tim Asher, and I'm based in San Francisco in the Castro neighborhood. And I've been doing this work for about 10 years now. And
Mm-hmm.
I got started in this work because I had a very powerful experience personally with acupuncture and alternative healing. And it happened to coincide with needing to find a new job. And I felt like my body was telling me through aches and pains that sitting in front of a computer for 8 or 10 hours a day was not the right way for me. And so almost on a whim, I thought, well, what about becoming an acupuncturist and getting into the healing profession? And I had just met a friend of a friend who was an acupuncturist, and I had, as I said, had a very powerful experience myself healing some back pain that I was having because I wasn't taking adequate care of myself, and my
Mm-hmm.
body was letting me know that. And so I just decided to make a shift from computer and business type work to the healing profession, and that was, let's see, almost 15 years ago. And yeah, it's been really great. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know. It's so interesting to hear about everybody and the stories that their personal stories, because they're always so compelling. And I just love how it's really out of finding the benefits for ourselves that people are able to move into this field and into this
yeah,
profession.
that's usually what drives people, is the desire to heal themselves of something.
Right, exactly, exactly. And so, what I guess has been, or I guess, let me go back a little bit, but what motivates you to continue to do the work that you do?
Ah, good question. I would say what motivates me is just the transformations that I see in the people that I work with. It's just really inspirational to have someone come in my office that is, often I see someone that is, they've tried all these other forms of healing, or they've done everything that Western medicine can do for them, and they're taking a bunch of different medications, and they're still just not really any better. And maybe some of their symptoms are managed a little bit, but they're not really much better. And so, just getting people really feeling better is just it's really a wonderful thing to get to participate in. So yeah, I would say that's what keeps me going.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And now, so I know you mentioned you've been practicing for about 15 years or so. So, have you seen any major or big changes in your work recently?
I would say that probably the fact that people are seeking out alternative medicine in much, much greater numbers these days. I think because there are so many chronic diseases of modern living and modern lifestyles that Western medicine doesn't often have a wonderful answer to, that people are seeking out alternatives. And I happen to be one of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to just go back to something that you had mentioned I guess, in preparation for the interview. You had mentioned that, acupuncturists and Chinese medicine practitioners in California are primary care practitioners, primary care providers. Can you maybe just expand on that a little bit
Sure,
and
yeah.
give us, yeah, some additional info?
Yeah, so in California, and in many other states, I think as well, but especially in California, people like me are primary care providers, which, what that basically means is anything that you would go to your primary care physician for, you could come to someone like me for instead. Um, Now, I'm a big, big fan of going to the right person for the right problem. Um, and so, if you have some sort of acute trauma or a broken bone or, something like that, then I would probably not be the best person to come and see. But
Mhm.
if you have a cold, or you have an ache and a pain that is not from a traumatic injury, or you have a digestive issue, or you're having trouble sleeping, or stress, or any kind of psychosomatic or psychospiritual type of issue, or a physical problem that Western medicine hasn't been very successful in helping you with, that would seeking out someone like me would be a really good next thing to try.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like how you threw in like stress in there. There's those times where we just like aren't, where we're stressed and we're not feeling our best, or even if there isn't anything like actually wrong with us, but we just know we don't feel well, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties of the Chinese medicine and many other alternative medicines, is that we deal a lot more in the subtleties of getting things before they become full-blown illnesses, and preventing some sort of really more severe thing from developing by seeking help early on.
Right, definitely. And can you maybe just expand a little bit on just acupuncture in general? Just a little bit more about that, how it can help, and why it can be so beneficial, like you mentioned, for any of the symptoms or illnesses that you had discussed previously?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a big question because, um, you know, Chinese medicine and acupuncture, which is a sort of a branch of that, is really a whole different understanding and system of medicine, viewing the body as a energetic, dynamic thing, which it can be very different from the sort of Western model of, if we can't see it, we can't really deal with it. But acupuncture, I think, for in the most basic sense, the Chinese medicine system views the body as having energy running through it, which we call qi, right? And many people have heard of that. And we use the acupuncture needles to affect the qi. And in a very basic, kind of rudimentary understanding, to help simplify it for people, pretty much anytime something is going wrong in the body, whether that's a pain or a dysfunction or something's not right, we can often, on a very basic level, think of that as qi that is not behaving or moving like it normally should and would in a healthy person. So we use the acupuncture needles to help move and affect that, to bring the body back into a balanced state. So.
Right, definitely. And so I guess just kind of going into my next question here, I know you mentioned that the needles are used to affect the chi. And so
Mm-hmm.
is acupuncture something that anyone can benefit from, would you say?
Yeah, I would say pretty much anyone can. And you don't, as you kind of mentioned before, you don't have to have a really acute problem to benefit from it. It's also a very preventive treatment and preventive medicine. So I have a lot of people that come to see me on a either biweekly or monthly basis, just to sort of maintain their health. And they find that when they are coming regularly for treatment, that they move through life with more ease. They don't get sick as often, and they don't have as many aches and pains, and they recover from exercise more quickly, and they sleep better, and they just don't get as stressed out as easily. And so it's really it can be very preventative in that way, which is wonderful. So.
Right. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I guess just kind of speaking to that a little bit more, I just want to elaborate just a tiny bit on Chinese medicine in general. So, is acupuncture just like a subset of what traditional Chinese medicine would be, or is that really what it encompasses, I guess?
Yeah, so traditional Chinese medicine is a kind of broader umbrella that acupuncture sits underneath. And really, Chinese medicine is a complete system of medicine that encompasses acupuncture. A very, very big part of it is also herbal medicine, dietary medicine, touch and massage, body manipulation, which we call Tui Na, and energetic healing, which through like it's called qigong, which is like a energetic healing that people do as well. Those are kind of the main branches of it. But yeah, it's really a complete system of medicine. So depending on what is ailing you, you know, those different modalities could be applied in different ways to help treat that.
Yeah, definitely. And now, do you think, any aspect about either acupuncture or Chinese medicine that you think is misunderstood, or that maybe people have a hard time maybe getting?
Yeah, I think definitely. Well, I mean, part of the challenge with Chinese medicine is that it is a completely different conceptual framework. And so, as you know, as I mentioned before, we talk about qi, which is this sort of invisible, etheric thing that sets our body in motion, and it can be very challenging for people to get on board with that when you can't really see it, and we don't, you know, when we dissect a cadaver, we don't see these meridian pathways that we talk about in dissecting. But I would say, if you can think of it as just more of a conceptual way of understanding how the physiology of the body works, and not be too attached to oh, well, I need to see a physical vessel for that, for example, and think of it more of the qi is it's the aggregate of all of the tissue that you can see, of the blood vessels and the nerve tissue and the lymphatic system, and it's the wonderful magical intelligence that's sort of coordinating it all. And so, and that I would say, and then one other thing I would say is that with acupuncture in particular, you know, people often have this phobia of needles, you know, because that's what we use. And, you know, I like to tell people that the needles that we use for acupuncture are so much smaller than the ones that you may be envisioning in your mind of, you know, hypodermic or for blood draws or vaccines or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, they're so sharp and so fine that they almost part in between the tissue rather than tearing it and causing pain like a vaccine would, for example. So yeah, it typically does not hurt like people think it's going to.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually where I was going to go with that. I was like, because I've had acupuncture, and I remember the first time I was like, oh, this is a little weird, but then it's like, it's fine. You don't have any issues with it. But for anybody who hasn't tried it, just knowing that it's really not painful.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
And the other thing is that typically I'd say 95% of the time people feel dramatically better after the treatment. So, you know, it's not just like you're going to go in and have to grin and bear it and get poked with these needles and not really understand why. Like, you're going to feel better at the end, which is really another part of my work that I love, is that people always come in and an hour later they leave feeling much better.
You know what? Yeah, and that's actually something that's so interesting, because you mentioned that sometimes people will just go for like a tune-up just to make sure, you know, that they're feeling well, that just for overall wellness. And I remember in one of my sessions that I had with an acupuncturist, I remember she came back in and I asked her, like, does everybody fall asleep during the session? And she was like, oh, a lot of people do, but most of the time, excuse me, you're just so relaxed that you're in this completely different state. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, because it really is relaxing.
Yeah, it really is. And for people that have never experienced it before, it can be kind of hard to understand that, because it's often a feeling of relaxation that is very foreign to people.
Right.
Yeah, if you've ever had a really, really wonderful massage where you kind of fell asleep because you were so relaxed, it's akin to that feeling often at the end of an acupuncture session. So
yeah, definitely. And I just think it's just so meditative too, in a sense. And I'm assuming just one of the benefits of all of those little needles, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. And I just kind of want to go to just a little bit deeper into your practice. So can you maybe share any transformational client study, or not studies, but any transformational client stories?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say it actually happens fairly regularly that I will have someone come in with an acute pain, often in their neck, that just kind of came on out of nowhere. And, they describe that they've been really stressed at work, and, perhaps they're having a problem in their relationship or a fight with their partner or whatever. And they've just been really tense and on edge, and their neck is spasming, and they're in really, really severe pain. And, I'll do the acupuncture treatment, and very shortly after putting in the acupuncture needles, they'll just have this incredible emotional release where often there'll be a few tears, and they'll just feel like they'll breathe a giant sigh and just let their body soften and relax, and the pain will go down probably 60 or 70%. And it's just, I mean, it's almost like magic, and it doesn't happen every single time, but it definitely happens with regularity, that when it does, it's just like, oh, I'm amazed every time. It's like, this is so cool.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also just kind of going into that, I know you mentioned that it is something that you'll start to see with regularity. So is there a certain time frame when somebody goes to see that they might expect to see results, or does it really just kind of depend on, I know nothing's guaranteed, of course, but does it really just depend on the type of issue, how long they've been dealing with it?
Yeah. It depends a lot on the person. It depends on their lifestyle. And as you say, it depends a lot on how long they've had it, and how deeply ingrained it is in their system. If someone comes to me and they have an acute pain for the first time, and they've had it for maybe a few days or a week, that's the type of case where typically it can go away very, very quickly. But if someone's been dealing with a chronic digestive issue or chronic sleep issue or something that's been going on for years and years, usually it's going to take a little bit more time. If someone's had it for years, usually we think of it's going to take months before really you're going to notice some dramatic improvement. And I always remind people that we live in such a fast-paced, like results tomorrow kind of world, and that's often just not how the physical body operates. And really, your body wants you to slow down and take better care of it, and move more slowly in general. And so when we have these expectations of like, oh, am I going to be better in 3 treatments or 5 treatments? And the answer is yes. And it depends on you, and how what you're doing in between the treatments, and are you helping mitigate some of the things in your life that were contributing to that pain or that issue. So I feel like when our body is in pain or is showing dysfunction, it's a sign. It's telling us your life is out of balance, and how open are you to shifting that back into balance? And that can be dietary, that can be lifestyle, that can be stress management, it can be work related, it can be relationship related. So it could be really a lot of things. So I guess the short answer is it really depends.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's so interesting too, because like you mentioned, people can go on for months or years dealing with pain or issue, and we expect to have some sort of relief next day, some instant gratification, and the body doesn't work that way as much as we wish it did, right?
Typically sustainable change does not happen that quickly. You can mask symptoms temporarily, very quickly, and for a short time often, but real healing and real change often does not happen overnight. So.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And what would you say to somebody who is struggling with pain or with a chronic disease or illness, who maybe hasn't tried acupuncture or might be interested in trying it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say just in general to someone that has pain or a chronic illness, don't take no for an answer. If some, I see a lot of people that, they've been to their primary care doctors or they've been to a Western medical doctor and just been sort of told, well, this is just a natural part of aging. Yes, that's true. And you can help treat it, and you can help lessen the symptoms. And there's lots of other things that you can do. Lots of different systems of medicine and dietary changes and exercises and just so much out there that, just keep looking and try different things and, connect more with your body, and listen to the messages that it's giving you, and tuning into your own intuition in terms of what methods and treatments and modalities might be good for you, I find is always a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And it really is so important to listen to our bodies. I think it's something that too many of us, or many of us, don't know how to do, maybe
Yeah.
are scared of doing.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it can be scary, especially if there's some, unexpressed emotions kind of lurking under the surface there of stresses from the past or heartbreaks from the past or whatever. And, but looking at those things is what we need to do to heal these things often.
right.
And that can be kind of a shock for some people when especially if someone really only thinks in sort of a physical 3D matter kind of reality. But, really our bodies are much more than just matter. There's thoughts and emotions and past traumas and all of these things working to create what our health is today, here and now. And so sometimes we have to address those things that have been built up through lives of, ups and downs.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely, through life in general. And
Yeah.
there was one other thing that you had mentioned that I just wanted to bring up as well, because I think it's so important for people to hear. And that was something along the lines of that anybody who does have a diagnosis that isn't necessarily correct or permanent. And did you just maybe want to expand on that a little bit? Because I love that.
Yeah. So, I just always encourage people to come back to the understanding that the body is a really highly dynamic organism that is constantly changing depending on what you do and eat and think and what medicines and what treatments. And so, if someone comes in and says, well, I have X diagnosis, or I have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and that, it can be very tempting for people in the Western medicine model to kind of become attached to that diagnosis. And, well, oh, this is what I have now. And, that is maybe what you have at this moment. And yet, next week could be completely different if you had a different job and you ate differently and you didn't have whatever it is, whatever ill thing that is working against your health. So diagnoses can shift and can change. And so it doesn't mean that you have to suffer with that diagnosis for the rest of your life. And that's really what I like to remind people of, and not become too attached to it, because, when we become attached to something, we are then starting to actively help keep it there, and if we don't want to live with that diagnosis, we need to be open to the idea that, oh, actually things can change.
Yes. That's all I have to say is just yes.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, so important. And then now, just to maybe, looks like we're just going to be wrapping up here in just a few moments,
Sure.
but just to wrap up, did you have any tips, any like wellness tips, or just acupuncture, Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, any tips that you would like to share
Sure. I would say a couple things on that note. Just in general, making sure that you are taking care of yourself. You know, that means different things for different people, but actively doing some sort of self-care is really, really wonderful. And, you know, the old adage of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is just so, so spot on when it comes to health like this. And just by taking a little bit of active role in taking care of your health and preventing health, it makes for a much smoother and more easeful aging process. And you get to have a body that just works better for longer. And that's wonderful. Um, and then secondly, I would say that especially in this modern, fast-paced, connected world, just how are you doing with stress? And are you doing enough to kind of counteract it? And through all of my practice in the last 10 years, I really feel like the most toxic thing for our system is stress. You know, more than smoking, more than eating poorly, more than drugs, like it is really the most toxic thing for our system. And so just becoming aware of that and making sure that you are doing whatever you can to kind of mitigate that and to offset that. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone who wants additional information about you or about your work, where would they go? Where can we find you? And then also, just to add to that, I believe there is a gift that you're going to be giving as well.
Yeah.
Can you
So
expand on that? Yeah.
for people that are interested in learning more about me, you can go to my website. It's timothyasher.com, timothyasher.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Um, and I would love to offer your viewers and listeners a 20% off of an initial consultation and first treatment with me. So for those people that are here in the Bay Area, I would love to see you.
Perfect, perfect. And I'll make sure that all of that information is linked up in the interview as well. And I would just like to say thank you so much. You gave us so much good information. I'm just really glad that we were able to get you on.
Oh, I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing because
Thank you.
it's much needed.
Thank you.